London, 1845. Victoria Osborne stared at her reflection in the tarnished looking-glass, tracing the unremarkable features that had earned her the whispered epithet throughout London society, the plain Miss Osborne. At 23, she was well past the age when most young ladies secured advantageous marriages. 3 disappointing seasons had yielded nothing but humiliation and the gradual realization that her lack of beauty, significant dowry, or influential connections made her all but invisible in the marriage mart. Miss Victoria called her lady's maid, "Martha, the carriage is waiting. Your aunt is most insistent you not be late for Lady Harrington's musicale." Victoria sighed, smoothing the modest blue gown that did little to enhance her appearance. Another evening of sitting against the wall, watching prettier, wealthier girls dance and flirt while she clutched her dance card, empty save for obligatory courtesy dances from elderly gentlemen who had known her late father. "Tell Aunt Agatha I shall be down directly," she replied, pinning a simple cameo at her throat, her mother's, and one of the few valuable possessions remaining to the Osborne family since father's death and the discovery of his substantial debts. As their modest carriage rattled through the rain-slicked streets toward Harrington House, Aunt Agatha recited her usual litany of instructions. "Remember to smile, Victoria. Nothing is more off-putting than that serious expression you insist upon wearing. And for heaven's sake, attempt some pleasant conversation should any gentleman approach you." "Of course, Aunt," Victoria replied automatically, though they both knew the futility of such advice. No eligible gentleman had voluntarily sought her company in 3 seasons. "The Earl of Westmoreland may be in attendance tonight," her aunt continued, a familiar gleam of desperation in her eyes. "His estate borders your late father's property in Derbyshire." "Perhaps a conversation about the countryside, Aunt," Victoria interrupted gently. "The Earl is seeking a bride with a substantial dowry to restore his family fortunes. I possess nothing but a crumbling manor house that costs more to maintain than it yields." Aunt Agatha's lips pursed in displeasure. "With such an attitude, it's little wonder you remain unwed." The arrival at Harrington House spared Victoria from responding. As they joined the queue of carriages disgorging fashionable guests, she steeled herself for another evening of polite rejection. The ballroom blazed with hundreds of candles reflecting in gilded mirrors, illuminating London's elite in their finery. Victoria followed her aunt, accepting a glass of watered punch and finding a seat along the wall where she could observe without drawing attention to herself. "Did you hear?" came a whisper from 2 young ladies nearby, unaware of Victoria's presence. "The Duke of Inverbourne has returned to London. After 5 years abroad. They say he's even wealthier now, something about investments in India and the Americas. And still unmarried," added the first girl with a meaningful giggle. "Mamma says every eligible young lady will be throwing herself in his path this season." Victoria allowed herself a small, wry smile. Edward Inversmith, the Duke of Inverbourne, society's most eligible bachelor even before his mysterious departure from England 5 years prior. Now he'd returned, apparently with even greater fortune, and would undoubtedly have his pick of London's most beautiful débutantes. A sudden hush fell over the gathering, followed by a wave of whispers. Victoria looked toward the entrance, where the butler was announcing new arrivals. "His Grace, the Duke of Inverbourne." The man who entered commanded the room instantly. Tall and broad-shouldered, with raven hair and penetrating eyes, the Duke moved with the confident grace of one accustomed to power. Though only in his early 30s, there was something in his bearing that spoke of experiences beyond his years. His formal evening attire, impeccably tailored, emphasized his athletic build without ostentation. Every unmarried woman in the room, and quite a few married ones, followed his progress with hungry eyes. Matrons immediately began calculating strategies to place their daughters in his path. Victoria observed him with detached curiosity. Such men existed in a different sphere, one where plain, penniless young ladies like herself were utterly invisible. She returned her attention to her punch, wondering how soon she might reasonably suggest to her aunt that they depart. She became aware of a shadow falling across her, and looked up with a start to find the Duke of Inverbourne himself standing before her, his expression unreadable. "Miss Osborne," he said, his deep voice carrying a hint of something she couldn't identify. "May I have this dance?" Victoria stared at him in astonishment, certain he had mistaken her for someone else. Your Grace, unless you would prefer not to dance with me. A slight smile played at the corners of his mouth. No. I mean, yes, that is, I would be honored, she stammered, accepting his outstretched hand with bewilderment. As he led her to the dance floor, Victoria felt every eye in the room upon them. The orchestra struck up a waltz, and the Duke's hand settled at her waist with surprising gentleness. You seem confused, Miss Osborne, he observed as they began to move in perfect time to the music. Forgive me, Your Grace, but I cannot imagine why you would single me out for such attention. His dark eyes studied her with unsettling intensity. Perhaps I prefer intelligent conversation to empty flattery. Your essay on education reform in last month's Ladies' Literary Review was most impressive. Victoria nearly missed a step. You read my essay? I published it anonymously. I have my sources, he replied with another enigmatic smile. Tell me, do you still believe that girls should receive the same classical education as boys? As they danced, Victoria found herself engaged in the most stimulating conversation she'd experienced in years. The Duke not only knew her writing but challenged her ideas with thoughtful questions that revealed his own formidable intellect. She forgot entirely about the staring onlookers, the whispers, even her own supposed plainness as she debated and laughed with this surprising man. When the music ended, he returned her to her aunt, who sat frozen in astonishment. Miss Osborne, might I call upon you tomorrow? There is a matter I wish to discuss. Of course, Your Grace, she replied, bewildered but intrigued. As he walked away, the ballroom erupted in speculation. Victoria caught fragments of shocked comments, the plain Osborne girl. What could he possibly see in her? Must be some mistake. Her aunt clutched her arm painfully. Victoria! What did you say to him? What matter does he wish to discuss? I have no idea, she replied truthfully, still dazed by the encounter. That night, Victoria lay awake, replaying every moment of her dance with the Duke. What could a man of his position possibly want with her? Despite her best efforts to quell them, tiny seeds of hope began to take root in her heart. The following afternoon, the Duke's magnificent carriage appeared outside the modest townhouse Victoria shared with her aunt. The vehicle alone caused a stir on their quiet street, with neighbors peering from windows as the Duke himself descended and approached their door. Victoria had dressed with particular care in her best day dress, a moss-green muslin that complemented her hazel eyes. She waited in the parlor, hands clasped tightly to stop their trembling. When the Duke entered, he seemed to fill the small room with his presence. After exchanging pleasantries with Aunt Agatha, he requested a private word with Victoria. Her aunt's eyes widened, but propriety demanded she agree. She retreated to the adjoining room, leaving the door conspicuously ajar. Miss Osborne, the Duke began once they were relatively alone, I shall come directly to the point. I believe we may be of service to one another. Victoria's heart sank slightly at his businesslike tone. How so, Your Grace? I require a wife before my 35th birthday to fulfill the terms of my grandfather's will. The date approaches in less than 2 months. I see, she replied, though she didn't see at all why this concerned her. I have no interest in the simpering debutantes paraded before me, looking to secure my fortune and title while planning affairs with more entertaining gentlemen. What I need is an intelligent companion who understands the responsibilities of my position. Victoria stared at him. Surely there are many accomplished ladies of good family who would meet such requirements. Perhaps. But I have chosen you. His dark eyes held hers steadily. I propose a marriage of convenience, Miss Osborne. You would have my name, my protection, and considerable freedom to pursue your intellectual interests. In return, I require your loyalty, your assistance in managing my estates, and your discretion regarding the nature of our arrangement. She could scarcely comprehend his words. Why me? She whispered. For the first time, he seemed slightly uncomfortable. I have followed your published work for some time. You possess the intelligence and character I require. And... He hesitated. I believe you understand what it means to be judged by superficial standards. Victoria felt her cheeks warm. So he had noticed her plainness and lack of suitors. This was charity, then. The thought stung her pride. This would be a true marriage, she asked carefully. His expression remained impassive. In all legal senses, yes. I would expect heirs eventually, though that need not be an immediate concern. Victoria turned away, her mind racing. The practical benefits were undeniable: financial security for herself and her aunt, freedom from society's pity, the ability to manage her father's estate properly. Yet the notion of a loveless marriage to a virtual stranger. I cannot accept merely because you believe no one else would have me, she said finally, lifting her chin. Something flashed in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, or respect. That is not my belief, Miss Osborne. However, I understand your hesitation. Perhaps this will clarify my intentions. He withdrew an envelope from his coat. The deed to Osborne Manor. I have purchased your father's debts and cleared the estate of encumbrances. It is yours, regardless of your answer to my proposal. Victoria stared at the document in shock. Why would you do such a thing? Consider it a gesture of good faith. He rose to leave. I do not require your answer immediately. Think on it, and send word when you have decided. After he departed, Aunt Agatha rushed in, demanding details. Victoria shared the Duke's proposal, watching her aunt's expression transform from disbelief to calculated delight. You must accept at once, she cried. The Duke of Inverbourne. No one would ever call you plain again as his Duchess. He wants a convenient arrangement, not a love match, Victoria reminded her. Love? What nonsense. Security and position are what matter. Her aunt clasped Victoria's hands. Think of what this means, child. You would be one of the most powerful women in England. That night, Victoria wrote in her journal, weighing her options. The Duke intrigued her, certainly. Their conversation had been the most stimulating she'd had in years. He valued her mind, even if he didn't desire her person. Was that not more than most marriages offered? And yet, something in her resisted the cold practicality of his proposal. 3 days later, Victoria sent her response to Inverbourne House. By evening, an invitation arrived requesting her presence at a small dinner party the following night. When Victoria entered the Duke's magnificent town house, she was surprised to find only a handful of guests, all serious, accomplished individuals rather than fashionable socialites. There was a renowned female novelist, a professor of natural philosophy, a pioneering female physician, and several others of similar intellectual standing. The Duke himself greeted her with formal courtesy, but she noticed a tension in his bearing that hadn't been present before. Throughout dinner, he ensured she was included in every discussion, subtly highlighting her knowledge and insights to the other guests. Later, as the party examined art treasures in the gallery, he managed to draw her aside. You haven't given me your answer directly, he said quietly. Victoria met his gaze steadily. I am still considering, Your Grace. Edward, he corrected. If you are to be my Duchess, you should use my given name. And if I decline? His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Then I shall respect your decision and continue to admire your work from afar. Why the urgency? She asked. Surely among all of London society, you could find a suitable bride before your deadline. Something flickered in his eyes. Perhaps. But I find I am particular in my requirements. A blue stocking with no marriage prospects and a modest family name, she suggested with gentle irony. To her surprise, a genuine smile transformed his features. A woman of intelligence, principle, and quiet strength who sees beyond superficial trappings of wealth and title. Victoria felt a treacherous warmth spreading through her chest at his words. I shall give you my answer tomorrow, she promised. That night, a violent storm lashed London. Victoria sat by her bedroom window, watching lightning illuminate the rain-drenched streets as she contemplated her future. Shortly before midnight, an urgent knocking at the front door startled her from her thoughts. She hurried to the landing, where she found her aunt already admitting a rain-soaked messenger boy. For Miss Osborne, he panted, extending a sodden letter. From Inverbourne House. Most urgent, Miss. Victoria broke the seal with trembling fingers, scanning the hastily written note. Miss Osborne, forgive the late hour. A matter of grave importance requires your immediate presence. My carriage awaits you. Please come at once. Inverbourne, you cannot go, her aunt protested when Victoria showed her the note. At this hour? It's most improper. Something must be terribly wrong, Victoria replied, already reaching for her cloak. I must go. The Duke's carriage delivered her to Inverbourne House within 20 minutes. The butler ushered her immediately to a wood-panelled study where the Duke stood by the fire, his expression grim. Thank you for coming, he said, dispensing with formalities. I apologize for the unconventional summons. What has happened? He gestured to a newspaper on his desk. Tomorrow's Morning Post. My man at the printer brought me an advance copy. Victoria picked up the paper, finding a prominently placed item in the society pages. Duke's mysterious past revealed. This correspondent has learned exclusively that the Duke of I, recently returned from abroad, departed England 5 years ago under circumstances most mysterious. Sources close to the family reveal His Grace may have fled to escape charges regarding the untimely death of his cousin and former heir, Lord R, found dead under suspicious circumstances at the Duke's country estate. Though no formal accusations were made, the Duke's hasty departure and extended absence have fueled speculation. Has one of England's wealthiest peers returned believing his dark deeds forgotten? Victoria looked up in shock. This is absurd slander. Who would publish such things? Someone who wishes to see me ruined, he replied grimly. The facts are twisted beyond recognition, but there's just enough truth to make it dangerous. What truth? She asked quietly. The Duke sank into a chair, suddenly looking weary. My cousin Roland did die at my estate. He had a heart condition unknown to anyone but himself. When I found him, I sent for the doctor immediately, but it was too late. His hands clenched. We had argued earlier that day, about his gambling, his mistreatment of the servants. Several people overheard our heated words. And you left England because of rumors? No. I left because his death freed me to pursue business interests abroad that I had long wished to explore. The timing was unfortunate. Victoria studied him. Why show me this now, before it's published? His eyes met hers directly. Because if you are to be my wife, you should know what you face. This is merely the beginning. My enemies will not stop with one article. Enemies. Roland had dangerous friends who benefited from his excesses. My return threatens their interests. He stood, approaching her. Victoria, I release you from any obligation you might feel toward my proposal. I would not have you subjected to such scandal. The use of her given name sent an unexpected thrill through her. Is that why you've pursued this marriage so urgently? To establish your respectability before these rumors emerged. For the first time, she saw genuine emotion break through his controlled exterior, a flash of hurt quickly masked. Is that what you believe my motives to be? Victoria considered all she had learned of this complex man. No, she said finally. I believe you are exactly what you claim to be, a man seeking a partner he can trust, not merely a decorative accessory. Relief softened his features. Then you understand why I must know your decision tonight. By morning, every door in London may be closed to me. Victoria took a deep breath. My answer is yes, Edward. I will marry you, and not to save your reputation, but because I believe in the man I've come to know. His expression transformed, and for a moment she thought he might embrace her. Instead, he took her hand, bringing it to his lips. Thank you, he said simply, but his eyes conveyed much more. What shall we do about this? She asked, indicating the newspaper. A determined smile curved his lips. We shall face it together. Beginning tomorrow. The following morning, London society awoke to two shocking items in the Morning Post. The first was the scandalous insinuation about the Duke of Inverbourne's past. The second, placed directly below it by an editor eager to sell papers, announced the Duke's engagement to Miss Victoria Osborne, with a special license already secured and the wedding to take place within the week at St. George's, Hanover Square. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Speculation ran rampant. Was Miss Osborne with child? Impossible, declared those who knew her reserved character. Was the Duke marrying beneath him to distract from the scandal? Perhaps, whispered the cynical. Was it a love match? Absurd, insisted those who had dismissed Victoria as plain and unwanted for years. When the couple appeared together at the opera that evening, every opera glass in the house turned in their direction. Victoria, dressed in an elegant new gown of deep burgundy silk, a gift from her fiancé, felt the stares like physical pressure. Chin up, Edward murmured as he escorted her to his box. You look magnificent. They're all wondering why you chose me, she whispered back. His hand tightened on hers. Let them wonder. Throughout the performance, Edward remained attentive, leaning close to share observations about the music that displayed both knowledge and sensitivity. During intermission, he proudly introduced her to acquaintances as my fiancé, the author, and engaged her in discussions that showcased her intelligence. As they prepared to leave, they were intercepted by Lady Harrington, one of society's most influential hostesses. Your Grace, she said with a calculating smile, such surprising news. One wonders at the haste. When one finds perfection, Lady Harrington, hesitation would be folly, Edward replied smoothly. The older woman's gaze raked over Victoria. Indeed. Miss Osborne has hidden qualities, one assumes. Victoria felt a surge of the old shame, then straightened her shoulders. His Grace and I share many interests, my lady. Intellectual compatibility can be as powerful an attraction as any other. Lady Harrington's eyebrows rose. How progressive. I do hope you'll both attend my reception next week. I fear we shall be on our wedding journey, Edward replied. Perhaps upon our return. As they departed, Victoria whispered, she doesn't believe for a moment this is a love match. What matters is what we believe, he replied enigmatically. The days before the wedding passed in a whirlwind of preparations. Victoria found herself swept into a world of privilege she had never imagined, seamstresses creating a trousseau of exquisite gowns, jewelers presenting historic family pieces for her approval, solicitors reviewing marriage settlements that left her financially independent regardless of what might happen in the future. Throughout it all, Edward remained a constant, steadying presence. Though he never spoke of love, his consideration for her comfort and preferences revealed a depth of thought that touched her deeply. Each day, she discovered new aspects of his character to admire, his fair treatment of servants, his genuine interest in her opinions, his dry wit that could make her laugh unexpectedly. The wedding morning dawned clear and bright. As Victoria prepared in her aunt's house for the last time, a messenger arrived with a small package from the Duke. Inside lay a first edition of Mary Wollstonecraft's A Vindication of the Rights of Woman and a note in Edward's bold handwriting, to my intellectual equal and life's companion. May our union break more conventions than merely those of hasty weddings and society's expectations. Yours. Edward. Victoria pressed the note to her heart, feeling the last of her doubts dissolve. St. George's was filled to capacity, not with well-wishers but with curiosity-seekers eager to witness the scandalous union. Victoria walked down the aisle on her uncle's arm, her simple ivory gown and family veil a stark contrast to the ostentatious display most had expected. When she reached Edward's side and met his eyes, she was startled by the intensity of his gaze. Their vows were exchanged with clear voices that carried throughout the church. When the rector pronounced them husband and wife, Edward's kiss was gentle but lingering, his hand warm at the small of her back. The wedding breakfast at Inverbourne House was a carefully orchestrated affair, with the guests selected to represent the highest intellectual and artistic circles rather than merely the fashionable elite. Victoria found herself engaged in fascinating conversations with people who knew her published work and valued her contributions. As evening approached and the guests began to depart, Edward drew her aside into a quiet study. "Are you ready to leave for Inverbourne Park?" he asked, referring to his country estate where they were to spend their honeymoon. "Yes, though I admit to some nervousness," she confessed. His expression softened. Victoria, I meant what I said about not rushing certain aspects of our marriage. We shall have time to become better acquainted. Thank you, she said, touched by his consideration. Though I find I already know you better than I expected. His smile reached his eyes, creating fine lines at the corners that she found unexpectedly endearing. As do I, Duchess. The journey to Inverbourne Park took them through rolling countryside just beginning to show the first blush of spring. As their carriage crested a hill, Edward pointed to a magnificent estate nestled among ancient oaks, with gardens stretching to a lake that gleamed in the late afternoon sun. Welcome home, he said quietly. Victoria gazed in wonder at the house that was now her home. It's beautiful. It has been without a proper mistress for too long. My mother died when I was 12, and the house has lacked a woman's touch since. The staff lined up to greet them, and Victoria was touched by the genuine warmth in their welcomes. The housekeeper, Mrs. Fletcher, had clearly been with the family for decades, her affection for Edward evident in her manner. We're all so pleased His Grace has finally brought home a duchess, she told Victoria as she showed her to the magnificent suite of rooms prepared for her. And one with sense in her head, if you don't mind my saying so, Your Grace. Victoria laughed. I consider that high praise, Mrs. Fletcher. Later that evening, after dining privately with Edward in a comfortable parlour rather than the formal dining room, Victoria found herself standing by the library windows, gazing out at the moonlit gardens. Edward approached, offering a glass of wine. Are you disappointed? He asked quietly. She turned to him in surprise. In what way? Our arrangement. The circumstances. He gestured vaguely. All of it. Victoria considered her answer carefully. No. I find I am content. More than I expected to be. He studied her face in the firelight. I should tell you something. About my proposal. Yes? It wasn't as impulsive as it seemed. I had been following your published work for over a year. When I returned to England, I made inquiries about you. He looked slightly embarrassed by this admission. I had already decided to approach you before I even saw you at Lady Harrington's musicale. Victoria stared at him. Why didn't you tell me this before? I feared it might seem calculated. Or peculiar. He set down his wine glass. The truth is, your mind attracted me first. Your essays revealed a woman of remarkable intelligence and principle. When I actually met you... He paused, seeming to search for words. You found me as plain as everyone said, she finished for him, the old insecurity rising. No. His voice was firm. I found your eyes more expressive, your smile more genuine, and your conversation more engaging than any woman I had encountered in years of society. He took a step closer. Victoria, I have not spoken of love because I believed you preferred our arrangement to remain practical. But I find myself? Yes, she whispered, hardly daring to hope. I find myself quite thoroughly captivated by my wife. His hand reached up to touch her cheek. If you would permit me to court you properly, now that we are married. Victoria felt warmth bloom in her chest. I would like that very much. His smile transformed his face, erasing the serious lines and revealing the passionate man beneath the ducal reserve. Slowly, giving her every chance to withdraw, he lowered his mouth to hers. The kiss began gently, a mere brushing of lips, but deepened as Victoria responded with unexpected ardor. When they finally drew apart, both were breathless. Perhaps, Edward murmured, his forehead resting against hers, our arrangement need not be quite as businesslike as I originally proposed. Victoria laughed softly. Perhaps not. 6 months later, London society gathered for the Inverbourne Autumn Ball, the social event of the season. The scandal that had threatened the Duke had faded after he produced irrefutable evidence of his cousin's heart condition and documentation of his business activities abroad. Those who had shunned the couple initially now clamoured for invitations to Inverbourne House. Victoria moved through the glittering ballroom, resplendent in a gown of deep emerald silk that complemented her now confident bearing. Ladies who had once dismissed her as plain now copied her understated elegance. Gentlemen who had overlooked her now sought her conversation, finding in the Duchess of Inverbourne a woman of remarkable intelligence and surprising wit. Edward appeared at her side, handsome in formal evening attire adorned with the insignia of his rank. "Are you enjoying your triumph, my love?" he murmured, his hand at the small of her back. Victoria smiled up at him. "Our triumph, I think." "Indeed." His eyes conveyed a private message meant only for her. "Though I find I'm eager for our guests to depart." She felt a blush warm her cheeks. Their marriage, begun as a practical arrangement, had blossomed into a passionate union that continued to surprise them both. "Patience, your grace," she teased. "The Duke and Duchess must maintain proper appearances." His low laugh sent a shiver down her spine. "As you wish, Duchess. But remember that appearances can be deceiving." His fingers intertwined with hers briefly. "After all, society once called you plain and unwanted, their greatest misjudgment. And their whispers now that the Duke of Inverbourne is hopelessly besotted with his brilliant wife." He smiled, the private smile reserved only for her. For once, society's gossip has the merit of being absolutely true.